So thank you everyone for joining us today. Really excited to show you what we have going on here with Badgr Pathways. So as you probably know, Badgr is a free open source badging tool, which we originally created to serve as a reference implementation for the Open Badges specification, and has since become one of the leading credentialing platforms in the world. Here you can see the Badgr backpack. This is a very easy to use system that allows the learner to manage the badges that they have from any Open Badges compliant platform. Today we will show you how to set up an issuer, how to create a badge for that issuer, and then how to start working with that with your users in Pathways. So let's go ahead and get started. So we'll assume for this that you have created a free Badgr account and you've already verified that account. So from there, you would go to issuers and create a new issuer. So in this case, I've prepared a few sample images. We will choose this one. So my new issuer is called my new issuer, creative. And we will say that it is concentricsky.com. And then here you will select a verified email address. And this is one that's already been verified, and this is theoretically the account that you use to create your account here today, but you could also use it with more of a central account if you wanted to do that, depending on what you plan to do with your issuer. So this is my sample issuer. All right, so now we've created an issuer, and this issuer now can issue open badges in Badgr, and then can issue badges through any of our connected apps. And the first connected app that we have to show is Pathways. So we're going to go ahead and create a badge. We're just going to generate something random here. That looks nice. Let's see, my test badge, right? And so there are a couple of fields that are required. When you're creating a badge, you need a description and a criteria. Badgr supports Markdown, so you can actually write here and add in a little bit of style if you like. So for example, if you wanted this to appear as a heading, you could do that. We'll go ahead and leave that there. So here you can actually have a URL that links to the criteria associated with a credential. And this is oftentimes a custom web page that talks about the program that the credential results from. In this case, we don't have one. We're going to leave it blank. Also, when you're creating a badge, you can actually put in alignments. And so you can actually align your badge to a competency framework. We'll save that for another day since that's a little bit advanced, but we'll talk about it as well on the Pathways side. And then in addition, of course, open badges and Badgr support tags. So we will say that this is a badge that offers some level of math skill or math fluency. Tags are frequently used for skills, although they can also be used for other purposes. So now that we have our badge here, we're just going to go ahead and create that badge. And you'll see that it appears here under my new issuer as a badge. We'll be returning to this page in a moment. So now we'll click Manage Pathways, and this actually launches the separate application Pathways. You'll need to log in to Pathways the first time and give Pathways authorization for it to connect to your Badgr account, because these are two pieces of software that are designed to interoperate. And so I'm going to go ahead and sign out, sign back in. You'll notice that it connects to Badgr where I'm already there connected. And then we'll find my new issuer. So here you can see my new issuer, and my new issuer does not have any Pathways, groups, or badges awarded, which matches what you see in Badgr. So we're going to go ahead and create our first pathway. And so my test pathway, let's see, my first pathway, there we go. And so the description is a bit of text that will appear on the right to the learner. It's generally featured as the thing that the first person that something will see when they are looking at a pathway. And I'll show you in the application where you see that. And so here you can see our first pathway. And this is where it starts to get really fun. So there are a few things about the interface to understand. So pathways result in a credential, and that credential goes right here. So the first thing we'll do is we'll set the credential that the learner will receive when they create the pathway. And that is the completion badge here. So you'll see that for completion badges, you can select badges that are associated with your issuer. And so you'll remember that we just created my test badge, and then we can see it over here as a badge that is available for me to issue for a learner who completes my pathway. And you can see here that we can see details about the badge. You can see here the markdown and also the tag that I created. And you'll see this for badges from any platform that are in the system, the same set of details. So this is the badge we want, and this is the badge that a learner will receive when they complete my pathway. So now let's look into what the learner might have to do to complete my pathway. And we'll say that we want our learner to have some academic skills. I can spell academic. There we go. You can have shortcodes. So we will find this oftentimes in educational contexts where you have a course code or something that you might wish to associate with an element of a pathway. And then here you'll see alignment data, which is something that functions to allow a pathway to exist in alignment with the competency framework, which, as I mentioned earlier, is a functionality we'll save for a future presentation. So let's go ahead and save this. So here's my first element, and you'll notice a few things about this. The first thing is that the element has a set of controls around it that allow you to create additional elements, either as siblings or as a child. So let's go ahead and create a few child elements. We're going to call this skill 1. Great. Now we'll just go ahead and create another one, and we'll call you skill 2. And then we'll make another one, and that is skill 3. You'll notice how easy it is to create elements in the interface. And we've created this really nice drag and drop system as well to allow you to move these around. So if, for example, you wanted skill 1 to be a sibling of academic skills, and you wanted to call it something else, say soft skills, right? You have this ability to move your elements around like this and rename them. So this is designed to be an authoring interface for the design of curriculum that is really, really easy and simple for an author to use. I'll point out a few controls. This control here allows you to edit the element that you have selected. So we've already seen that there. This allows you to move the element, and this shows you all of the various locations in the tree to which you could move an element. So if, for example, we wanted this to appear below academic skills, we could just grab it and move it there. Of course, we have this drag and drop system as well. So you have lots of options for working with the system to get the elements arranged how you would like them to be seen by the learner. And then, of course, we can delete this element if we chose. So elements can be completed by two different factors. One factor is a badge can be associated with an element. So let's go here. Let's add a new skill 1 element to our pathway. And for skill 1, we would like the learner to present to us a badge that is issued via a system such as Canvas, a badge that is awarded manually, or via any other connected app in our system. So here we will go and we will look at these, and we call these required badges. And a required badge is a badge that a learner needs to present, as in it needs to reside in their Badgr backpack in order for an element to be completed. So let's look at required badges. And here we can see badges that I have access to. And this is my account, my Wayne at Concentric Sky account. And you'll see here that I have badges from all of the issuers that I have a staff role on, which are quite a few here. And you'll see this badge that we just created here appears. However, we're issuing this badge to the learner over here. So let's go create a new badge. Let's go create a shopping badge. Excellent. So you'll see this is just a really simple badge. This is a badge that we've decided we are going to have the learner earn as part of their pathway. And you'll see here now that my new shopping badge appears under my badges, and we're going to select that badge. So this is a badge that could be defined to be, as I mentioned, triggered by any other system. So any system that's connected to Badgr could issue this badge. And so now if the learner has it, they can satisfy this. But I might be interested in accepting a badge from another system, something that I feel is equivalent. And so what we can do is we can look over here at this thing that is titled All Badges, which searches our badge rank system. So Concentric Sky has designed a search engine for digital badges, which we call Badge Rank, that allows us to search the badges of the world across the major platforms. So for example, if this pathway were supposed to be teaching math, I could type here the keyword math, and then I could search all of the badges that are in Badge Rank, which includes badges from major systems such as Credly, Acclaim, Moodle. Let's see, we have quite a few other systems as well. We're working with some of the major providers to provide us with badges, and then we're also gathering badges that are found out in the world. And in this system, you have the ability to actually read information about the badges. So here's a badge. Looks like this is an Acclaim badge. You can see all of the tags that are created in Acclaim. You can see the badge itself. You can link to the issuer. And you can use this system to actually vet badges in other platforms. And so Badge Rank is the only system that allows you to look at badges across the various platforms, read their descriptions, criteria, and other information, and then choose if we're going to accept it. In this case, we're going to accept this badge. So now if a learner has this open badge in their backpack, they can satisfy this element of this pathway. And in this case, we've said that the learner must have both my badge and this other badge, but we're going to change that to either or. So the learner now must present either my shopping badge, which could be triggered once again by any system, or this badge here from Acclaim, which they would earn via whatever system is set in place by this issuer who's using Acclaim. And so now the learner has a choice. They can have one of these two badges, right? And so let's look at skill 2 here. For skill 2, we're going to add a required badge, and we will take this badge from some other system. Let's see what we have here. This is a Math Wizard, indeed. I like Math Wizard. We'll go with Math Wizard. So this appears to be a Canva badge out of Canva badges in Canvas. It doesn't really matter where the badges come from, and that's really the whole point of the system. So our Pathways tool implements our new proposed Open Pathways standard, which allows us to stack credentials from any platform. And so here you can see we're doing an either or stacking with a Badgr badge and an Acclaim badge. Here's a Canva badge. You can go through here, search again for math, and find a, let's see, that's another Badgr badge. Just find whatever other badge we like here. Great, a Credly badge. We'll accept that badge. So now you can see that we can just stack across platforms, right? It doesn't matter really anymore what you're using to issue your badges. What matters now is how the badges relate to each other and what you can do with those once you have these relationships defined. So for skill 3, we will choose another badge and we'll get a little bit more specific. We're going to say this is a fractions badge. So we can search the world of badges. We'll say, oh, look, this looks like a nice badge. We'll go ahead and accept that one. And so you can see that you can now build pathways out of your own badges or badges created by any other party that's using open badges. And this is the real power of the system, that you have this really nice way of creating pathways, and you have this ability to stack badges across multiple systems. So let's look into the rules for completion a little bit. You know, as I mentioned, an element can be completed by a learner satisfying this required badge, right? They can present this badge. Or this element here, which has no associated badges, is completed by the state of its children, right? And in this case, we are saying that the learner must complete 2 of the 3 children in order to complete this element. And here we can say this element counts towards the completion of its parent. If we change that, now you'll notice that we have 3 children here and we can require all of them. So this allows you to create and model robust different types of curricula in the system. So you can have complex dependencies and you can stack badges across multiple systems. Let's see, so let's go add some soft skills. We'll say we have a communication skill. We'll have that here. For communication, maybe we want to go search the world of badges for soft skill badges that relate to communication. Let's see here. So many communication badges in the world. We'll accept this one. Now, if any learner can present this badge to us, they can satisfy this communication skill element. So the thing to take away from this is that each badge really is just triggered by an external system and is sequenced here in Pathways. And this includes Badgr badges and badges from other systems as well. So now if a learner can complete all of the requirements that I've set here, they can earn this credential, which could be a credential that is of small granular value or of larger and greater value. And so let's go see what this looks like for the learner now. So here we're going to hop back over to Badgr, and we're going to go ahead and award Wayne this badge. So going back to our pathway, I see that I need to publish my pathway. And this is a key thing to understand, is that pathways exist in a draft form until the pathway is published. And until the pathway is published, a learner can't go through it. So now this pathway is published. And I've been awarded the badge, but I'm not actually associated with this pathway at all. So the next thing that I would need to do as the creator of the pathway before I can send my learners through it is to create a group. And this will be my first group, and this is cohort 1. It's going to be a group, a section, a class. This can be automatically populated via API in connection with other systems. And here is where we will say Wayne is associated with this pathway, right? And now you can see that I have been invited to this pathway. So now I should be able to see the pathway on my system here as soon as I sign out and sign back in. There we go. So now you can see that I have been added to the group. So as a learner, all you would see is your pathway subscriptions here. And then in our next release, we will actually be able to search the world of pathways and show the learner all of the pathways upon which their badges fall. We'll be covering that in a future demo. But let's see. We authorize this issuer so that you don't just get to take any user and allow them into your pathway. The user has to choose to associate their account so that you can't just have anyone inviting anybody to a pathway. Here you can see that I, as the learner, have one badge, and therefore my progress here is represented. You can see that I have partial completion of this element, but what I don't have are any of these other badges. But I can see here information about the badge, and then you can link out to the URL or see what the criteria under which the badge could be earned, so you can see how you can go get the badge. So in many cases, what we're doing is we're actually linking to the assessment. So if these were all my badges, then what I would have here would be a link to the assessment that the learner would need to take to go and earn this badge. What this does is it gives the learner a graphical representation of where they are in the system. And this is the great failing, we think, of the badge universe at the moment, is that what learners are presented with are walls of badges. They don't really understand how the badges relate to one another, or what the sequences might be through which they might be able to go and complete a given set of curriculum. It may not be that they need all of the badges in a sequence to complete, as you can see here, because we have some either or rules. So you can see here what it looks like for the learner. The learner has this ability to do something which is unique, and that is to share this pathway, including their progress. So this allows us to do something that is unique to the pathway system. So rather than sharing this individual badge that I have with the prospective employer to say, I have a badge, go figure out what it means, I can now share with the prospective employer a badge in the construct of a pathway. So now I can share with an employer the fact that what I want to communicate is that I am working on this credential, be it a CTE credential, a degree, or some other high value certification that the employer might care about, but I'm not there yet. So what I can share with the employer is the fact that I'm working on it and what my progress is towards it. And so this allows us to move beyond discussing static snapshots of learning, and instead move towards talking about the directionality of the learner's journey. And so this entire data object is represented in our standard that we call Open Pathways, making it a portable data object in the same way that a that a badge is a portable data object. I mean, you can share this with an e-portfolio, right? You can share this with another system and embed this URL, which will automatically update as the learner collects badges. So it's a real-time representation of the learner's progress that can be embedded into other systems. And so we feel like this is a lot more useful than embedding an individual badge or sharing an individual badge, because badges lack context. And for this reason, a lot of organizations try to create the smallest number of badges possible and to focus solely on badges that are resume worthy. However, we feel like Open Badges is a technology that's capable of quite a bit more than that. And that the desire to reduce the noise in the badge ecosystem, it really is stemmed from the inability to contextualize badges against each other. And for this reason, we've created Pathways, which allows us to describe how badges relate to each other. And then the badge rank search engine, which allows us to rank badges based on their associated outcomes. And with these two systems, we can actually provide information about badges using the badges themselves, instead of relying on the accreditation of the issuer, right? Instead of relying on a third party to tell us what the value of a badge is, we can actually start to analyze it based on its real outcomes. And this moves us forward and allows us to actually make these things machine readable, which is really the entire point of digital credentials from our perspective. So you can actually have badges that are issued by multiple systems. So for Badgr, we have the ability to issue badges by scanning a QR code with your phone. So you could actually have a badge here that's triggered by our event system. And then you can use those to create pathways that represent conferences or any other sort of real world learning pathway. So here's a pathway that represents the InstructureCon conference from last year. And these are all badges that are triggered via by scanning a QR code with the learner's phone. Now, clearly there's no pedagogy around that. A lot of people might consider that noise. It's not certainly a badge that you would share on your resume. However, by taking the badges and stacking them together, we've actually determined quite a bit about what this learner has done as part of this pathway, which just happens to be a conference. We know that this person visited the vendor area, that they watched the keynotes, right? That they actually spoke to people about the lounges. And so the holders of this credential over here have actually done quite a bit of work. They didn't just go to the conference, they were active participants, right? And so this is the difference between what you can tell with a credential that's stacked out of smaller badges and just the badges themselves. So these badges may not be resume worthy. This credential absolutely is. So you can actually use this system to mix and match badges across different triggering systems. So you can actually have badges that come from real world activities, such as visiting a school library, visiting the registrar, real world blended learning types activities. And you can combine those with badges that are triggered via an LMS like Canvas or some other system. And this allows you to accomplish true blended learning with the system. So you can actually mix and match badges from these different types of triggers, and you no longer really have to worry that every badge itself is resume worthy, because you can structure them now. You can stack them with pathways. So another key thing to understand about pathways is that stackability aspect. And so let's hop on over to my example pathway here. And so here you can see a pathway that we use for examples. It mixes and matches credentials from about a dozen different organizations. And the idea here is to understand the stackability of pathways, because a pathway begins with a badge and ends with a badge. And what that means is that we can actually have pathways that span institutional contexts. So this is a badge here that is designed to be issued by a high school, right? So this is an AP course from a local high school. It is the terminal badge of another pathway. And so you can see that this badge starts this pathway, which represents a model community college curriculum, which ends in a badge, which can start another pathway at an employer training setting, which ends in a badge, which can start another pathway in a continuing educational professional development context. So what you see that we're doing here with Open Pathways is allowing us to create data structures that describe the learner's lifelong journey, the lifelong learning journey of that learner in a system-independent way, right? So we now have a way of describing all of the connections of all of the credentials and skills that our learner might earn throughout their entire learning journey in a way that's based upon an open standard, making those stackable and portable across systems. So what we can do here is we can actually begin to stack our pathways with our new issuer. Let's go down to our new issuer and take a look at our pathway. So now we can see here that this credential, my test badge here, will be earned by the learner when they complete this pathway. So let's go make a new pathway. Let's call this pathway number 2 for sake of argument. So this is another example pathway here. And so for this, the first thing I'm going to do is require my test badge, right? And so now this pathway is a pathway that will be open to a learner when they have earned this credential from my other pathway. And then I can start to add other elements. We will call this soft skill number 5 or something like that, right? And then we can move it over here. We can actually start to build pathways that begin with the credentials from our other pathways. And this allows us to create curricula that stack together in really complex ways. So you can actually model the types of curricula that you might see in a K-12 setting, in a community college setting. You can start to model the types of curricula that you might see in a corporate training setting, and on up into continuing ed and professional development. So the goal with this is to create a set of technologies and tools that allow us to really leverage the power of these open standards, open badges, CASE, extended transcripts, and others. So a couple of other things to know about this while we're talking about other standards is the ability to share the JSON of a pathway. And so we'll just jump down here to this example. So this is a portable data structure, as I mentioned, based on open pathways. You can actually export and import the JSON related to that. So let's just go ahead and grab this JSON. So now we have a representation of the pathway that we can use to create a new pathway, potentially even in another system, right? In the same way that an open badge is portable, this pathway and the data objects around it are also portable. And that is the open pathway standard, which allows us, in effect, to take competency frameworks, turn them into navigable structures with badges attached to each element, and then output at the end of that a standards compliant transcript. Right? So you can think of the pathway itself and the objects within it as the open pathway. And then the learner's individual progress through that data structure is the transcript. Right? And so that is the object that the learner would see, or the learner would share when they share the pathway here. And I'd like to spend the rest of the time answering questions because I see there are quite a few of them. So what's our first question?
So I've been answering many questions in the chat as we go, but the first question is, what pricing is there for getting started with Pathways? Yeah, that's a great question. So our current introductory pricing with Pathways has it free up to 100 learners. And so the pricing for Pathways can be seen here. And so we allow you to track up to 100 learners on unlimited Pathways for free. And the goal is to get people trying the system. We believe that it is extraordinarily interesting and really opens a new dimension around what's possible with digital credentials. It really answers the question of why would a learner want a credential in the first place, right? You know, other systems, you share it out to LinkedIn or Facebook in some broken fashion, since neither of those systems really supports open badges. End of story. Right? That's the end. They hand it off and they're done. There's no other use for an open badge. In our system, you can actually search the world of badges for the pathways upon which your badges fall, which allow you to explore new opportunities, potentially enroll in programs at nearby organizations, nearby schools. And so this allows you to really answer that question of why would a learner want a badge? And the answer is to find what pathways it unlocks for them. So in order to create a large number of pathways, you know, we've introduced this introductory pricing to really help people just dive in and start piloting. Badgr itself is free. You can build pathways for free and then track up to 100 users for free. And then additional pricing is available here. Next question. Next question is, can Pathways be co-authored, and how does that work to share the authoring responsibility? So, yeah, and this question came from Daniel, as I mentioned very briefly in the chat. The ability to share authorship duties across different users is possible in the system. You just have to add your user in Badgr as a staff member on the issuer. And then, so Lane will show here, going to an issuer that he is the owner of, and you can add additional staff members by email address, make sure that they have a Badgr account, and set the privilege level to editor or owner. And users at that editor level, which is read-write access on resources owned by the issuer, editor or owner can be co-authors of Pathways. That issuer will then just show up for that new user in the Pathways system when you log in with Badgr, and you'll be able to go right into the same editing experience.
Next question.
How does Badgr Pathways know who is part of the 100 learners that you're tracking for the free tier? The answer is, it is the number of unique users across all the different groups that you have. You do not pay twice for a user if you put them into 2 different groups. And so it's the issuer account that you're paying on behalf of, not like the Badgr login user. So if you're sharing that issuer with multiple users, you only have to pay once for the issuer, and then you have the ability to track up to those 100 users for free. As we add features around this, we'll have the ability to set groups as inactive, and so only the unique members in the active groups will count toward your total. And once you set a group inactive, it will no longer automatically award completion badges on your pathways to that group.
Well said.
The students never have to pay to be on the Pathways system. It's always the issuer that's paying on their behalf with our low prices.
Excellent. Next question.
Next question from Rajinder. Once you set up a pathway and then set up a group under that pathway, can the pathway be customized for that group? A pathway customized for a group, the customization that applies just to one group instead of to all the groups that are subscribed to that pathway.
So no, you can't do that. So that would be a separate pathway. You could copy your pathway, the JSON for it, right? You can export that and then import it into another pathway and create a copy of it, but that would in effect be a separate new pathway. So there's no way to have different versions of the same pathway.
Let's see. Grania asks, does the system work on mobile for issuers and learners?
So we do have responsive views for the system. So you can see what it looks like as it gets smaller and smaller and smaller here. It's really a system that's designed for use on a larger screen because it's a tree interface. But yeah, we do have it so that you can work with it here in a mobile way.
And I think you might even click on one of the elements and see if it'll open up the sidebar in full screen. Cool. Yeah. So you're on a mobile breakpoint there. The goal is for it to be as usable as possible on even really small phones with, maybe the authoring experience might not work quite as well, but it's totally possible to get all the actions done in the system.
Exactly. All right, next question.
Gerard asks about how this system might be able to be used for matching up recipients with for example, job vacancies in the future?
Yeah, we do have a future functionality planned that will allow a learner to suggest their own badges as badges that might fill elements of a pathway. And that functionality can be used as the cornerstone of exactly what you're talking about. Right, so the ability to say, here's the curriculum offered by our organization, and have a learner submit the credentials that they feel qualify them for that. And then we can do a matching based on that. But that's definitely future functionality. It doesn't do that right now.
Can we alter a pathway once it's been published? If we were to update the pathway, then how would it affect the previous learners who have been issued the pathway badge of completion? Excellent
question. So here, why don't we just go try and do that, right? So here we have a pathway where a learner has already started going through it. Let's just add a couple of elements to it. So we're gonna complicate our pathway here. Great, we're gonna save that. So this says that all of your changes will potentially result in changes to the experience of the learner. So in essence, what would happen if I were to say, take this and move it over here as part of my editing, right? Effectively changing this to something that would perhaps be solely required to complete the pathway, then it could potentially automatically issue credentials to everyone that is subscribed to the pathway. So in general, we recommend great caution modifying pathways once learners have started going through them. Although you can keep drafts of a pathway, and it won't actually affect the learner until you publish the pathway. So now I've published it. And if this were the sole thing that was required to earn this badge, then I would automatically earn this badge, which in general is not the intent that you would want to have. So it is possible to change the experience for people that are already subscribed, and you'll definitely want to be careful about that.
And for clarification, Daniel asks, would it revoke a credential if you change the requirements?
It would not. So no, you would not, if you change the requirements leading to a credential, it would not revoke that credential for people that already had it. Since it seems like we do have a little bit more time, let's talk just briefly about competencies. So here for every element, when we are in editing mode, you can see that we can get to information about this element. So here you can see an alignment URL, target code, and framework name, which you can use to grab information from Competency Framework, such as case. So here you can see a tool called OpenSalt, which is an open source system for visualizing competencies in the case framework. And you can see that every element of this tree has a URI, which is a unique address that relates specifically to this skill in this framework. You can actually use this to create an alignment between this element and that competency framework, right? And so now we can say that this skill is aligned to that competency. And in the next version of our system, you'll be able to search the world of badges for badges whose alignment object also matches that. So you may recall that when we were over here and we were creating our badge, one of the things that we could do was to actually input information about its alignment. So if, for example, this badge relates to skills in Common Core or in GSS or CEFR or some other framework, you can actually say the badge aligns to that. And then in Pathways, you can say the element aligns to that, and you can search the world of badges for those badges that alignment objects match that, that competency framework. And in this way, we can actually tie those things together, which is why we describe the system as making competency frameworks navigable. A couple other things I'll point out about the system. We do have a warning element here, which tells you when your pathway is not completable. So this pathway here has requirements, which means that a learner has no way to actually complete this. And this will tell you which elements are actually problematic. So this element here is required to complete this, but has no completion criteria. So we could give it completion criteria by setting a required badge that a learner could present, or by giving it children and making those children completable. In this case, what we're going to do is simply remove the element, right? And you'll notice that our warning here has reduced to just one element that's not completable. You can click on it and actually identify the element. And this is a system that we call ping. And this just allows you to see the element that you're looking at in these more complex frameworks. So as you start building larger and larger frameworks, then it's possible to sort of lose your place. And so to simplify that for people, what we've done is we've made these things clickable to show you in the UI what it is you're looking at. And then you can always find your current element here. And so if we were to move over here, then you would see that this is now our current element, and these are its children, which helps us when we're building these things. If they don't have badges that are instantly recognizable to the eye, then this is a way just to help you find your place in the system. So going back here, we see that we have this element that isn't completable. Well, let's make this one completable, and so we'll make it completable by finding a badge. And let's say, how about a fractions badge? How many fractions badges are there in the world? A few.
We're seeing a fraction of them.
Yes, indeed, we're seeing a fraction of them. Let's see, it looks like this is a digital promise badge. So yeah, that looks great. We'll accept that badge. So now the learner can present this badge, which means that the pathway is now completable. You'll see that there is no longer a warning here. And so this just helps us make sure that we're not creating structures that are not actually finishable. And so we actually can test to make sure that the pathway is completable. And then we can publish it.
Caitlin asks that a badge You mentioned earlier that a badge might be awarded by a student scanning a QR code. How does this system connect to others that offer that function?
So, we have a separate system. So Pathways is a connected app for Badgr. We have another connected app for Badgr that we make available called Event Badgr, which takes the form of a game. You can see it here. This is a game that we actually ran at InstructureCon last year. You can see a set of badges that are defined. They can be earned by scanning QR codes. It has a histogram showing the learner where they are, and then a leaderboard that shows who's collected what badges and when. And so this system actually will issue badges which will appear in the learner's Badgr backpack, and then they will be here when they're satisfied. So Pathways is a tool that you would use to build the framework. Event Badgr is the system that you would use to actually trigger the issuance of those QR codes. And really, you can use any open badge from any system as long as the learner can get the badge into their Badgr backpack. And that can be done either via API connections or by the learner uploading the badge from an external system. And it's a requirement of all Open Badges compliant platforms that they make those open badges easily downloadable for their learners. Some platforms do a better job of that than others.
Rajinder asks, could a badge on the pathway be set as optional? How does it look like to have optional badges so that the user could either earn the badge or not, but still complete the pathway?
Yeah, great question. So the question is, can badges be optional? And the answer is yes. So here you can say that the learner needs all of the badges. Here you can say that now the learner only needs one of the two badges. That creates a degree of optionality to it, but we could get a little bit more specific by breaking this up into child elements, right? So we'll say new element 1 and then new element 2, right? And so then we can actually move these badges to the child elements, right? Which effectively creates the same system. This skill element is now completable, but rather than the badges being tied to this element, we're going to tie them over here. So let's see. We'll go back for math badges. Let's see, Math Wizard badge. There we go. And then I don't recall what this one was. We're going to go with, I like Math Wizard, we'll go with that. Great. So now our two badges that are required are broken up over here, and we have the ability to say whether it counts towards the completion of its parent element or not. And so if we uncheck that box, then this element can now be completed only with this, and this is entirely optional for the learner. So you'll notice we use this color coding system here to show you which system, which badges are required. And you'll see here that this is listed, this is optional. And so only this is required, that one's optional, and that is another way to do it if you don't want it to be simply an either or choice for the learner. We also have the ability to create what we call a non-child prerequisite. So this is entirely optional now in that it does not count towards the completion of its parents in the tree. But we could actually say that in order to complete, say, this one, that you would need to complete that. And so that is what we call a non-child prerequisite. And that means that you can require something that is not a direct child. And that creates this relationship. So now in order to complete this element, the learner not only has to get these badges, they also have to get this badge, even though that badge is not a child of these. And this allows us to model more complex types of relationships that you might see in different types of curricula. So quite a bit of functionality around what you make optional and what you make required and how those things are structured. Next question.
Zachary asks to see the progress comparison interface again, specifically see how it is that a user can, an issuer can compare the progress of two different members of a pathway. So you're looking at
excellent. Yeah. Okay then, well, let's see if we can find a place where I have pathways where I have multiple users. I think so. Let's... fabulous. So here you can see one member, and then here you can see another member, right? And this
other. In that drop-down box that shows all the members of the pathway, you can see their overall progress bar. And so if you're wanting members to get to 100% on the pathway, you can easily compare who's at 100%, it'll have that little check mark, and who is not yet there.
And in addition, as you cycle through members, you can compare their progress here in the green aqua color to the overall average group progress to see who's ahead, who's behind on element by element basis.
And we are working on an analytics product that will be another Badgr connected app that will have some robust analytics. You can see how this would obviously make sense as a histogram if you turn it on its side. So we do make all the information available just as we do with Badgr. We find that most organizations prefer to work with raw data rather than to see a simple pie chart like this. And so we do make that information available for Badgr and for all of its connected apps as well. Although we will have some pretty fancy analytics coming up here pretty soon. We also have for this particular control in our next iteration, we will have a next and previous, so you don't actually have to click through every user if you want to look through them. Great question. We appreciate everyone's time today. This is a system that we've only had out now for about 3 weeks. So it's under active development. You'll notice changes coming just about every week as we complete further items on the roadmap, each making it better, making it more integrated with other systems, and making it easier to use. If you have any feedback for us to offer based on the presentation you've seen today, or from actually getting in and using the system, please email us at Badgr, B-A-D-G-R, at concentricsky.com. Thanks everyone for your time. Much appreciated. We'll wrap up the call here. As I said, please feel free to reach out at any point if you have any questions.